Hello everyone, peace be with you. I welcome you back to the program. If you have been watching, if not, welcome to you. Everyone gets the same welcome. I hope you're doing well. So we're back with another discussion. Last we spoke, we talked about we entered part 2 of the book, part 2, Eritrea Liberation War and Refugees, which basically reflects the title of the book, which is Eritrea, Root Causes of War and Refugees. And it's written by Mr. Walde Jesus Ammar. So we discussed how religion and ethnicity, we kind of got like a sneak preview as to how religion and ethnicity played a big role in the revolution. And them being in the introduction, and what we went over regarding them tells us that this situation, liberation war and refugees, included these two major factors, which were ethnicity and religion. Why are they major? Because they're what are mentioned, and not only that, they are the only two factors mentioned in the introduction to this part. We're going to see how all of this affects everything. Someone asked me in the comments, people can coexist culturally. No one said nobody can coexist. Nobody said nobody cannot coexist culturally or ethnically. No, nobody said that. Nobody's implying that. However, you will see that it wasn't the case when it came to the story. The story did not go as one may hope it would have went. As one may hope it would have gone. Another person commented saying that he feels he says he or she as an Eritrean Tigrinya feels closer to the Tigrinya of Ethiopia, if I remember his comment correctly. So, I mean, can I blame him? No. Maybe Higdef would blame him for that. Maybe, Sha'biya folks, Sha'biya meaning, because not all Sha'biya like Higdef, so not all Sha'biya like Isaias, so there's a difference between the two. So they might be against that, but I mean, if that's how he feels, who am I to say that, oh, you should not feel that way, you should be an Eritrean, you must be proud? I mean, that's up to him. I mean, it all depends on what he feels or she feels. This is a subjective matter. It's not objective. It's subjective. A lot of this involves what people feel. If it's subjective, as the revolution was subjective because the revolution was a response. It was a response to an oppression that was done unto a people who all shared the same oppression. Now, if at the end of things they decided to part ways, that's up to them. There is nothing in this world. If you go to outer space, you will not see borders. You will not find borders if you go to outer space and you look onto the earth. Or if you go to Google and Google Earth or Google the earth, you won't see any divisions. People are the ones that create them. And a lot of times it's the colonizers who cut these pieces. They're the ones who cut the cake. Anyway, so we spoke about religion and ethnicity last time we spoke. Now we're going to begin with chapter 4 of the book, and it's the first chapter of part 2. Chapter 4 is titled Armed Struggle and Refugees, Phase 1, 1961 to 1975. If you remember, Mr. Walde Jesus told us that he would be dividing he would be dividing the 30-year span into two phases, both being amounting to 15 years. So 15 years for phase 1, 15 years for phase 2, and both involving two different fronts. Okay, so what we're going to talk about, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a video for the introduction, or rather not for the introduction, but for what is called the formative stage. I could go further than that, actually. So let's, in any case, let's start. Let's start. Before anything, I begin in the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful. I praise and I glorify him as he ought to be praised and glorified. Let's begin. So, chapter 4, Armed Struggle and Refugees, Phase 1, 1961 to 1975. A, the formative stage. A, the formative stage. The Eritrean armed struggle was declared a year before the Federation was unilaterally abrogated by Emperor Haile Selassie. The international instrument that linked Eritrea with Ethiopia was irreparably eroded, and its dissolution became a foregone conclusion. So that international instrument that linked Eritrea with Ethiopia was irreparable. It was done. It was irreparably eroded, and its dissolution became a foregone conclusion. It was basically the end of things. It was as one may say, it was mission failed. That's it. Mission failed. It could not be salvaged. Done. And who was to react? For close observers of the scene, it did not require much of a prophetic calling to state the obvious. Now we go to a quote by Travaskis, and that's the source of this quote, which Mr. Walde Jesus includes. So again, for close observers of the scene, it did not require much of a prophetic calling to state the obvious. The Eritrean Muslim accepted a federal association with Ethiopia reluctantly. He did so unwillingly. He didn't want to do it. But whatever, I'll do it. That's what happened. It was not with enthusiasm and desire. No, undesirably, the Eritrean Muslim accepted a federal association with Ethiopia reluctantly. And he would be the first to resent undue Ethiopian control over his affairs. So the first one to respond to this, to undue Ethiopian control, was the Eritrean Muslim. Former leaders of the defunct political parties were already in exile in the neighboring Arab countries. Cairo, Egypt. Cairo was the political center. The former president of the Eritrean Assembly, Idris Muhammad Adam, and the former leader of the independence bloc, Ibrahim Sultan, joined the indomitable journalist and trade unionist Walde Mariam and other political refugees in Cairo on the 23rd of March, 1959. The Egyptian capital was also hosting a fast-growing number of Eritrean students who had no higher educational opportunities in their country or in Amharic-speaking Ethiopia. Literally all were Muslims. So these people who were members of the political parties in Eritrea, but they were in exile, they joined, they came together. So it was Idris Muhammad Adam, Ibrahim Sultan, and Walde Mariam. So, and other political refugees. That place, Cairo, the Egyptian capital, was hosting a fast-growing number of Eritrean students as well. It says that literally all were Muslims, because in Eritrea or Amharic-speaking Ethiopia, there was no opportunity. So Haile Selassie, basically, he tore the world apart. May God's curses be upon that man. Ethiopia's systematic obliteration Ethiopia's systematic obliteration of the territory's uniqueness targeted the economic sector. Ethiopia's systematic obliteration of the territory's uniqueness targeted the economic sector. Thousands of workers had to go somewhere outside Eritrea, both to escape the prevailing political insecurity in the country and in search of work. Many Eritrean Muslims thus went to the Arab countries, where they faced practically no cultural alienation, especially concerning religion and language, because many of the Arabs are Muslims. Many of these Eritrean Muslims, they share the same religion. And they also speak Arabic. That was not easy for the Christian Kabessans. By the way, in my understanding, maybe I'm wrong, Mr. Walde Jesus Ammar is not Muslim. Just so you guys know that this text was not written by a Muslim, and it's not a biased text. And even if it was written by a Muslim, this is the reality of the matter. No one would disagree with what's happening in a lot of what is mentioned here. Also, ever since the British occupation of Eritrea, a very large number of Eritrean Muslims were serving in the Sudanese army. They were greatly influenced by the euphoria of independence in the Sudan and the rest of the surrounding region. The Eritrean people were now generally unhappy. Many of the former Unionists who, starting in the mid-1950s, supported the existence of the federation, did not, of course, like Ethiopia's excessive encroachments on Eritrean affairs. The economic strangulations and the transfer of many enterprises from Asmara to Addis Ababa were not welcome steps. Similarly, the imposition of Amharic as the sole official language and medium of instruction was felt with great bitterness. If you guys remember, if you saw the series that I did on the historical orbit of Eritrea's agony by Dr. Alam Sagad Abbay, he mentions how he met a lady, I believe it was before, so he was to travel abroad, and I don't know where, but he met a lady, and the lady was Eritrean, but she spoke Amharic. And so I think he told her that, if I remember correctly, he said, like, wow, how do you speak Amharic so well? And she said, she lifted her finger, she said, school. She said school. So, and she mentioned a book, a children's book, which sadly, this children's book is not a happy book for all. It's a book that is associated with colonization. And the book's name is Lemma Begabeya. I don't know if it's Lemma or Lemma. Lemma Begabeya. Lemma in the market. So he mentioned that book, or she mentioned that book. And so what happened is that, this is what happened. They were being forced to learn Amharic. It was imposed upon the people to learn Amharic. I mean, if it was something that was not imposed, if it was delivered to them in another way, I don't imagine the people would have, to have rejected. Meaning, like, if let's say a kind government says that you could speak whatever language you want, but since a lot of the people here speak Amharic, it would be good if you learned Amharic. People probably would have said, okay, I mean, if it's going to benefit us, if it's going to be the way English is in the world, a kind of international language, a universal language, or a working language in a land, then why not? But these people in Ethiopia, and these, not just Ethiopia, but many dictatorships, they don't learn. They don't learn that force doesn't work. You cannot succeed with force in the long run. Maybe in the short run, but in the long run, no. Haile Selassie was ousted in 1974, and his hell existed since, I don't know, the late 30s. So it never lasts. The guy was overthrown, Haile Selassie. The Eritrean people were now generally unhappy. Many of the former unionists who started in the mid-1950s. So there's a footnote. A good example of this change of mind from being unionist to independentist. A good example of this change of mind was Tedla Bayru, who was also mentioned, if I remember correctly, in Dr. Alam Sagad's book or his article. Tedla Bayru, the former leader of the Unionist Party, who resigned from the top Eritrean government post of chief executive in 1955, partly because of excessive interferences of the emperor's representatives in Eritrea. See Sherman. We went over, I think, Sherman, so that's why the source is not mentioned, only the name of the author. We read this, by the way, this paragraph, but I wanted to go back to many of the former unionists who starting in the mid-1950s, supported the existence of the federation, did not, of course, like Ethiopia's excessive encroachments on Eritrean affairs. So, and then we finished that paragraph with similarly the imposition of Amharic as the sole official language and medium of instruction was felt with great bitterness. It is important to note here that during the late 1940s, there were talks about a 10-year trusteeship period, a 10-year trusteeship period, or a 10-year preparatory period of administration for Eritrea under this or that power, meaning under some power, any power, before the question would be finally disposed. So 10-year trusteeship before the question would be finally disposed. My guess is that means that before that Eritrea would be decided what would happen to Eritrea permanently. Thereafter, after the 10 years have lapsed, there was talk about this. In the late 1950s, then, people were talking seriously about the end of the 10-year period with Ethiopia in 1962. Few cared or knew how to verify the provisions, but many were prone to accept wild speculations that the UN would review and finally settle the Eritrean case at the end of the federal experiment. There's a footnote. However, the Federation had no time limit. I used to think that it was a 10-year limit, but that's not the case. That wasn't the case. There was no time limit. However, the Federation had no time limit. It must be noted that the 10-year speculation could have also arisen of the earlier British proposal after the four-power enquiry visit to Eritrea, when the four powers would send their investigators to Eritrea. So it could have also arisen from the earlier British proposal that Ethiopia could be assigned to administer the territory for a 10-year experimental period. So that could also have arisen from that earlier British proposal to experiment. What's it going to be like if Eritrea joins Ethiopia? Experiment. I mean, other people deciding the matter for the people of the land, as if the people of the land don't know any better. Which one could say maybe they didn't know any better because of the Italians having stripped them of the thought of being on their own. But if you leave them to their own, maybe they'll figure their way out. They're on their land after all. In any case, so few cared or knew how to verify the provisions, but many were prone to accept wild speculations that the UN would review and finally settle the Eritrean case at the end of the federal experiment. At the same time, it was felt that some action would be necessary, either to preempt Haile Selassie's aims or to ensure UN intervention before or even after the dissolution of the federation. Some Eritreans thought of organizing themselves for a more concrete struggle. Two organizations were born out of this suspense. Foreign support was expected. So two organizations formed out of this suspense. And we're going to see right now who those two organizations were. One, the Eritrean Liberation Movement, the ELM. Don't forget the movements, that the early movement, the early organizations which started before this trash, filth organization of pigs came into the picture and sat on the seat of power, so-called power, and destroyed the country. You know who I'm talking about. So don't forget of those movements which included people who had honor and dignity, people who truly represented freedom and who truly represented the People's Front for Justice and Democracy. You're going to tell me Isaias? You're going to tell me something that when a donkey defecated, that came out? That's what you're going to tell me, that's the honor of my motherland? The most important event in the spring of 1958 in Eritrea was the general strike called by the underground labor movement, protesting against Ethiopia's political and economic suppression. Demonstrations which spread from Asmara and Massawa to other smaller towns in the country lasted for 4 days before they were suppressed through the use of brute force. The footnote says the official account was 5 killed and 534 wounded. See Eritrea, victim of UN decision and Ethiopian aggression. ELF-PLF appeal of the 3rd of December 1971, New York, NP.ND, I don't know what those stand for, page 78. Other sources alleged up to 80 dead. The second important but sad event for Eritreans in 1958 was the lowering down of their flag. The flag at that time was the Malay, which I believe in Tigray is called Khadra. And so it's the blue flag with the olive branches, the 2 green olive branches. That's the flag, not this Maoist, atheist, agnostic flag that you guys see waving nowadays. It's agnostic, has nothing to do with religion. If you wave that flag, you have nothing to do with Jesus Christ or Muhammad or God or the Quran or the Bible. You have nothing to do with it if you know what that flag represents. The second important but bad event for Eritreans in 1958 was the lowering down of their flag. And the third, no less important event was the formation of the Eritrean Liberation Movement, ELM, late that year at Port Sudan, popularly known as Haraka movement. Haraka means movement in Arabic, or Mahbar Shaw'ateh in Tigrunya. The group of 7 in Tigrunya. And the Arabic rendition was Harakatu Tahrir Eritrea, حركة التحرير الإريترية. So it was known as the Eritrean Liberation Movement in Arabic. It was called Mahbar Shaw'ateh, or Association of 7, because it proliferated in cells of 7. Mahbar Shaw'ateh. In Tigrunya, the organization established cells in the Eritrean towns. The activists were initially concentrating on Muslims whose response was usually expected to be positive. The Jabarti, Kabasan Muslims, played a very significant role in the nationalist movement of that period. Nevertheless, the response of the Christian Kabassans, especially workers and students, was a surprise to the organizers. The source where one can find this, that it was a surprise, is Markakis. We mentioned his source earlier on. Total ELM membership was roughly estimated at 40,000. That's a lot of people. 40,000. That was total ELM membership. So, nevertheless, the response of the Christian Kabassans, especially workers and students, was a surprise to the organizers. At that time, everyone was assuming that Walde Maryam and the others in Cairo were behind this movement, which it was hoped would do something quickly. Initially, the ELM was interested in recruiting the Eritrean police for an immediate success through a coup d'etat. Its call was most welcomed by Eritreans in the Sudanese army. One of them recounts how all 80 Eritreans in Brigade 2 of the Sudanese army became Haraka members. They became members of the ELM. When the organization sent them a letter partly saying, so again, one of them, so the ELM was interested in recruiting the Eritrean police for an intermediate success through a coup d'etat. Its call was most welcomed by Eritreans in the Sudanese army. One of them recounts how all Eritreans in Brigade 2 of the Sudanese army became Haraka members. When the organization sent them a letter partly stating, "Our flag had been taken down, so we have decided and begun to organize the people to fight against the Ethiopian regime to get, in brackets, to get independence." This can be found in Gunter Schroeder. I don't know how to pronounce the Schroeder with the double dot on top of the O. Gunter Schroeder, Interviews with Early ELF Fighters. Unpublished manuscripts. Muhammad Umar Abdullah, Nom de Guerre Abu Tiyara, I think it's Abu Tiyara, interviewed on 22nd of March 1989 in Kassala. So that's the source of this, where one of them, I believe, one of the Eritreans who served in Sudan. The mass mobilization it says has, but I think it means was. The author meant to say was, I believe. The mass mobilization was very efficient and quick. This was not because of the organizational skills employed, but because of the popular enthusiasm that prevailed. It was the enthusiasm that prevailed, not because of the organizational skills. It was the enthusiasm that prevailed. The ELM held its first and last Congress in September 1960 in Asmara with about 40 delegates attending. It was then decided to prepare and stage a coup d'etat within a year. But before it could do anything of that sort, Mahbar Shaw'ate Haraka was dismantled by Ethiopia's ruthless and suppressive machinery. I have also read that the ELF also contributed to dismantling them. I have read that as well. Why? Because the ELF saw them as like, what's your guys' plan? What do you want to do? And the ELM, they, I guess, wanted to do everything secretly at first or something like that. The ELF members at that time, like Idris Muhammad Adam and those people of his like, they wanted to get right to it, get right to the fighting, I think it was. That's what I have read in another source. So it was Ethiopia and ELF, according to another source. According to here, I believe it's limited to Ethiopia. Ethiopia's ruthless and suppressive machinery. Secondly, the ELM was weakened and superseded by another organization. Correct. So he mentioned it. Yeah, forgive me, and forgive me, Mr. Walde Jesus, if you're watching this. Yeah, so, and forgive me, viewers, also. So secondly, the ELM was weakened and superseded by another organization because it was not accepted by the old politicians in Cairo. It was not accepted by the old politicians in Cairo. Its 5 founders, Markakis mentions, most of the information was provided by one of the 5 founders of the ELM. So most of this information is provided by the five founders of the ELM. Its 5 founders were mainly from the Karan Sahel region and could not enlist the people of Barka without Idris Muhammad Adam in their group. A key founding member of the ELM, Muhammad Saeed Naud, was born and educated in the Sudan, where he became member of the youth branch of the Sudanese Communist Party. He was originally from the So Mr. Walde Jesus actually told me. So I will read what it says, but I'll make the correction. He was originally from the aristocratic Beit Asgede tribe. Beit Asgede tribe in the Sahel. So I believe he was not from Beit Asgede. He was from from Bani Amr. I believe that was what Mr. Walde Jesus told me. It was a mistake. So there are some things here which need updating or correction, and it's okay. We forgive the author because the author did. Don't you see all the work he put into this text? I mean, glory be to God. It educates a person who has no idea about Eritrea, all about Eritrea. So he was from the Bani Amr group. By the way, Beit Asgede, just a quick mention. Beit Asgede is said to have migrated from the highlands. So they, if I'm not mistaken, are relatives of the Tigrinya, Beit Asgede. And then through migration, somehow they ended up becoming, I think, Tigray. They were Tigray. They are Tigray. They still exist, Beit Asgede. Also, it's important to mention that in the book, there's a book written in Arabic, which and also, but I'll mention the other book as well. The book is called Al-Blin fil Madi wal Hadir, the Blin in the past and in the present. It's a history book about the Blin, written by a Blin named Abu Bakr Jamil or Idris Abu Bakr Jamil, something of that. Something like that. Idris Muhammad Abu Bakr Jamil. His name includes those 3 names. So in that text, he mentions that Beit Tawqi, which is my clan or group, there is a view. It's like you can say it's just a view of other views that the Beit Tawqi were descendants of a king named King Meroni. And this King Meroni, who is I believe, a mythological king who existed sometime, I don't know, after the 10th, sometime after the 11th century. After the 10th century, 11th century existed, and his name was Meroni, and he was the forefather of the Beit Asgede and the Beit Tawqi and the also I believe of the Tigrinya. There's a book called Maiwani. Maiwani is it's about a Tigrinya group in the highlands, I think Hamasian. And in that text, there's a similar, I haven't read the whole text, but there's a similar reference to this King Meroni. King Meroni, so the source that author uses for what King Meroni, for the story of King Meroni being the father of the Beit Tawqi, it's found in a book written in Tigrinya called Zanta Eritrea by Mikael, his name is Mikael Hassama. I think his name is Mikael Hassama. and he, I believe, is Tigray, and he wrote a book called Zanta Eritrea, which goes over all the tribes and clans and subgroups. Whether how much of it is real, is true, not real, I don't know, but he goes over everyone from Eritrea. Zanta Eritrea meaning the story of Eritrea, you can say that, the story of Eritrea. So Zanta Eritrea. So let's finish this. Let's finish this. So about the ELM, and we will end it there, God willing. So Muhammad Sa'id Naud, it says he was originally from the aristocratic Beit Asgade. He was from the Bani Amr, if I remember correctly, tribe in the Sahel, as opposed to Ibrahim Sultan's serf background, also from Sahel. All these factors posed stumbling blocks to any future growth of the organization. Neither was it well served. So again, all these factors posed stumbling blocks to any future growth of the organization. Neither was it well served by its pacifist stance at the beginning, because it was pacifist in the beginning, I guess. So what happened is the ELF wanted to know, they wanted to get straight to the fighting, if I'm not mistaken. They wanted to get straight to the fighting. The ELM was not giving them all of their plans or something like that. The ELM was very secretive. Although I do wish we could have seen what the ELM would have done. I do wish that group survived, because I think the ELF, just as the EPLF, I think they contributed to the destruction of the revolution, just as the EPLF did. Both of them did. That's not to say all of the members were bad, no, but of both EPLF and ELF, but that's to say that their groups and their leadership was just not working. Anyway, its belated attempt, the ELM, its belated attempt to launch an armed struggle in May 1965 was frustrated at Ela Tzada in the Sahel, when its 50 fighters were forcibly disarmed and 6 of them killed in an Eritrean skirmish. Eritrean skirmish. Eritrean against Eritrean skirmish. So that's the end of what is said about the ELM. After, the next group is the Eritrean Liberation Front, ELF. So we're going to talk about the ELF on the next episode, the day after tomorrow, God willing. Okay, guys. So I hope you're doing well, and I hope we've learned some things. I hope that we've learned. There's always something to learn, even if I haven't read this text in quite some time, and I didn't review this part actually this time. So I didn't review what I was about to read. So in any case, we end here. I wish you all the best. I wish you the best, and keep safe, be well, and I'll see you, and peace be with you, and I'll see you next time, God willing.